Hello YouTube, this is Pixie. You probably looked at the description of my video and were a little bit turned off by it maybe. Um, and you're also probably a little bit confused. I've posted two videos on YouTube in the past. Those were about my life with DID or multiple personality disorder. So seeing a video that I'm posting about tarantula keeping is probably a little bit not what you were really expecting, I'm assuming. And I can definitely explain. Um, so, as I mentioned, I do suffer from DID. I also do suffer from severe mental health issues such as major depression, PTSD, and I also have a slew of different phobias. One of those phobias is arachnophobia. Um, and that one was the hardest one for me just because it got to the point where I wouldn't open my windows during the summer because I might let a spider in. I wouldn't go for hikes anymore because there's spiders outside. I wouldn't go camping anymore because of spiders. To the point that it was really affecting my life. The other phobias I have are more situational. I don't do very good in crowds. I don't do very good with certain scents, certain smells, or certain experiences. Um, I know that I do have trypophobia, which is the phobia of clusters of stuff. Um, and that's actually a pretty severe phobia that Pixie has, who's one of my alters. Um, so the arachnophobia, though, is the one that actually does affect my life the most because I love being outside and it grew to the point where I couldn't be outside anymore because I was so afraid of spiders. Um, so I decided that I was going to start keeping tarantulas. And a lot of people might think that that's kind of counterintuitive to keep a tarantula or keep an animal that you're terrified of. It actually has helped me quite a bit though. It's helped me to realize first off how fragile these creatures are. Also that they're not what horror movies portray them as. What's always kind of thrown me off is that whereas a lot of people tend to try to help you overcome certain phobias, it seems like arachnophobia or also fear of snakes, those kinds of phobias are encouraged by people or they're used to tease people. Um, when I was young, um, and this may have caused at least one split in my personality, I'm not sure. But when I was real young, I do remember that my brother had a friend named Robbie. Um, he is not somebody I would want to talk to ever again, and hopefully he has either grown up or, he's somewhere that he can't hurt anybody. Um, when I was very young, he collected a jar full of spiders and he dumped them on me, knowing that I was terrified to death of spiders. And despite the fact that my mom, my dad, and everybody in my family loves spiders and, they wouldn't kill them or anything like that, I was terrified of them. And I got teased a lot for it. So I kind of came to the point where I was like, I didn't want to live this way anymore. I love animals of all kinds. I know spiders are very helpful to the environment. They're very helpful to farmers. They're helpful in general, and normally they're not going to go out of their way to hurt you. So I knew all this logically, but the very definition of a phobia is that it's an irrational fear. Um, Basically, what would happen when I would see a spider is that I would obsess. I would try to catch it, which normally ended up with me getting so scared that I would throw up or get physically ill. So I would try to catch it. That didn't work. I would try to kill it, but I was afraid to kill it. So I would end up spraying it with stuff, like, perfume or furniture polish or window cleaner and things like that. Then I would feel horribly guilty because the spider was normally just minding its own business. Now, of course, there were always those times when, I'd see a spider and then I would go to get something to kill it with, and then I'd come back and it was gone. And then that would induce a panic attack, and I wouldn't get sleep that night because I was so afraid of it, creeping into my bed or something. So this was really a phobia that was affecting my life, and like I said, it's a very irrational phobia. Because I mean, when you think about it, spiders are this big, and we're this big. So it wasn't rational, and I know it wasn't rational, but I couldn't seem to get past it. So basically, that's what a phobia is. It is an irrational fear. People who suffer from phobias often have panic attack-like symptoms that are triggered by this particular item or this particular situation. So it is a true mental illness. It does affect our lives very much. And I feel like it's a mental illness that doesn't get taken very seriously. And that really has always bothered me. So, with that said, I'll be talking a little bit more about my tarantulas and how I actually did get to the point where I wanted to start this project that I'll explain a little bit more in depth here. One thing that I do want to mention is that a phobia doesn't necessarily have to involve a hatred. A phobia is about fear, or an irrational fear. If I met somebody who had arachnophobia who said that they hated spiders and tried to kill them every chance they get, I would not recommend that they go out and get a tarantula. Why? Because that's cruel to the animal. I would recommend getting a tarantula or facing your fears to somebody who is ready to move on. Since collecting tarantulas, I've been teased an awful lot by people because now I don't feel right killing a spider that's in my room or in my house, so I catch them and I put them outside. And I get teased a lot for that, and my thinking has always been, well, this is a step in the right direction. I am facing this fear and I am not killing these animals anymore. So that's a good thing. But some people just aren't there yet, I guess. But it's not a hatred of something. It's a fear, a very irrational fear. So basically, what my idea was is that I would start a project called the Arachnophobes Guide to Tarantula Keeping. This would basically be my story as well as little tips and tricks that I have learned for keeping tarantulas when you're arachnophobic or when you're afraid of actually keeping them. What you'll find is that there's a lot of people in the hobby who got into the hobby because they were afraid of tarantulas. The thing is, they've been in it for so long that they kind of forget how scary it is at first. So for example, if you ask them, well, how do I feed them? Then they'll say, oh, you just toss in 2 crickets and you're good. That to me sounds like, yeah, in order to feed these sharks, you just go and you roll in some chum, and then you hop in the water, and you're good. It sounds terrifying. Because in your mind, you have this playing where you're going to be frantically trying to get the cover back onto the tank while this spider is, charging towards you and jumping for your neck to bite your jugular or something like that. And granted, the more you get used to them, the more you get used to being around them, the more you'll see that a lot of your idea about how they were going to be or how this entire experience was going to be is completely off. You'll realize that they're actually very docile most of the time. Now, also, I would want to, in this care guide, actually give people good advice as far as which kinds of spiders to get. For example, if you're afraid of a tarantula, you probably don't want to go out and get an orange baboon tarantula, also called the OBT, or an orange bitey thing. They're very aggressive, they will charge, and they're very potent venom. What you would probably want to get is something like a Choco Golden Knee. That gets to be a fairly large size, but they're very docile and they're known to be kind of teddy bearish. So that's kind of the idea that I had behind actually setting up this tarantula care guide for people who have arachnophobia. The problem that I'm kind of running up to is coming up with the actual concept, the actual idea behind it. Part of me thinks that doing a video blog would be really cool. Part of me thinks doing a website would be a cool idea, and part of me thinks that I should just write a book. somebody suggested doing all three. I don't have time. So that was kind of what I wanted to put out to the internet, is to get input on this. Um, so I do kind of want to tell the story of a very special tarantula that I have. Um, his name is Charlie, and this is kind of an emotional story for me. And you might say, well, it's a spider. Yep, he's a spider. I understand that. Well, technically, he's a tarantula. They are two different species, but, whatever. Um, the reason that it's hard for me is because I didn't realize how attached I was going to get to these guys. When I first got them, my idea was to get over this fear of tarantulas, and then after that, I didn't really care what happened to them. That changed radically, though, when I met Charlie. Charlie is a Grammostola rosea, also known as a rose-haired tarantula or a Chilean rose-hair. When I first got him, he was sold to me as an unconfirmed female, meaning that at the pet store they said, we're not really sure if this tarantula is a male or female, we think it's female though. So no, I could not return him back to the store. The day that I actually went to get him, I had been researching for several months on tarantulas, on their care, on which species would be the best species for me to get. I had decided actually on a Brachyphelma vagans, also known as a Mexican red rump, and I had a breeder lined up that was going to sell me these two, but he kept vanishing on me. So finally I just kind of said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go to a pet store and I'm going to get a tarantula. So I called a few different pet stores. Nobody had a Brachyphelma vagans, which was not too surprising. They're not very common in pet stores. Several pet stores did have slings, different size sling spiders that were good beginner species. I was afraid of having a sling spider though because they're very tiny, as I'll show you here in a minute. They're very tiny, they're very delicate, they're very fragile, and to me also they look more like spiders than the full-grown tarantulas did. Um, to me, I didn't want something that looked like a house spider that could accidentally get loose, and then I would kill it thinking that it was a spider, and then realize that I had just thrown a bunch of money down the drain. And that's all I cared about at that point. So, called to few different pet stores, and one said we have two very good beginner species here. We have the rose-haired, and we've got a avicularia viculera, which is also known as the pink toe. I had heard a little bit about these guys too, and I was kind of like, oh, well, okay, that would be cool. Then I'd have an arboreal tarantula, and I'd have a terrestrial tarantula. The difference, of course, between those is that the arboreal tarantula is more, they'll live more in the trees. Terrestrial will live on the ground. So I said, oh, okay, well, I'm interested, and I'll probably pick it up in the next few days. So I got off work that day, came home, got the terrariums all set up, and Charlie's tank has not been moved around very much. The pink toe, named Khalid, her tank has been moved around quite a bit because when I set it up, I accidentally basically made a wonderful hiding spot for crickets to go where they didn't want her to eat them. And she wouldn't chase after them. So I had to move her tank around. Also, her tank set up before had a few very bad spots for growing mold. So had to move everything around. It was a learning experience. And actually right now she's perfectly fine. She's sitting up in her web. It looks like she's getting ready to molt soon. But so I went home, got their tank all set up and everything, and then I drove off to the pet store. And I'm at the pet store, and there's somebody at the checkout, so, I'm walking around a little bit and picked up some feeder tongs, which, if you're arachnophobic and you're getting tarantulas, I do suggest you get a pair of these. This is for catching the crickets with and then feeding the tarantulas or dropping them into the tank. If you have spiderlings or slings, these come in really handy because you have to feed slings individually. If you're feeding them crickets, you have to do one at a time. Of course, if you're doing fruitless fruit flies or flightless fruit flies, then that's not a problem. But these come in really handy for tarantula care in general, like if you need to move a food dish or something like that. So anyway, now that that tip is out there, um, so got the feeder tongs, then went up and said that I had called about the tarantulas, and so they showed me the pink toe, and she was all curled up in a little ball, and she was sitting on the side of her enclosure. It was only about yay big. It was a little deli cup, and she was all curled up in a ball, which I'm learning that when they're curled up like that, it means that they're not really happy campers at that moment. Um, so I said, okay, well, I'll take her, and she is a confirmed female. And so they said, okay. And then they showed me three roseas. Um, and Charlie stood out because he had really, really pretty pink highlights. He actually is a very pretty boy. And so I said, I like that. I would like to get that one. And they told me that, like I had mentioned, they said, we think that this is a female, but we're not sure. I said, okay. Well, my thinking was, it's just a spider. If it's a male and it dies, then I don't care. I'm just trying to get over this fear I have. So on the way home, I'm driving there, and of course, I start laughing hysterically because here I am, somebody who's terrified of spiders. I am bringing home two spiders, one of which is like, this big, and they're sitting on the seat right next to me in their little enclosures. So I'm freaking out, and I'm having a huge panic attack, and I'm laughing hysterically because that's what I do when I'm in the middle of these panic attacks sometimes. And trying to figure out how in the world I was even going to get them into their permanent enclosures, because I was thinking, well, I'm certainly not going to pick them up. How am I going to do this? What is wrong with me? Um, and then I was distracted because I heard a sound, and it was coming from Charlie. He wasn't making a sound, but if you can, this is the lid from the container he came in, and I don't know if you can see, but you see all those little, there's some scratches like right around here, here. He actually did those. He was so scared, he was hanging from the top of the container, and he was trying to literally chew his way out of that container. And I actually wasn't afraid of him at that point. Suddenly occurred to me that he was just as afraid as I was to be going on such a huge journey. So, I started talking to him and trying to comfort him, and of course, he's a spider. It didn't do any good. I know it didn't, but it kind of helped me to start that bond, or to start that bonding process. So I got home, I put them into their tanks. Kali, the pink toe, one thing that you will learn about pink toes if you decide to get one is that they're fast. And while they tend to have this habit where they'll sit motionless for a really long time, and then when you prod them, they put on like this burst of speed. She actually made me squeal quite loud because she put on this burst of speed and she almost got out of the house or out of her tank. Um, so that's basically the story how they came to be into my possession. Um, and I had a very wonderful friend who has several tarantulas of her own, and she, when I posted pictures of them online, she was very excited that I got these. And at first I was kind of like, I'm kind of second guessing this whole thing, but she started talking to me about them, and her enthusiasm for them just rubbed off on me. And I couldn't help but get enthusiastic too. I still call her a very bad influence. So I, over the following weeks, I found that I was getting more and more attached to them. I called her down, my friend who has the other tarantulas, I called her to my house so that she could help me with them because, like I had mentioned, Khalees' tank wasn't exactly set up very well. It looked really good, but it wasn't set up very good. It had some practicality issues. Also, I had put in some cork board, and because of the high humidity in her tank, the cork board started to mold, so I had to get it out. So this friend came down, and she handled both of them, and both of them loved being handled. Both of them did a wonderful job. They didn't rear up. They weren't aggressive or anything. Um, and she then told me that Charlie, who we were calling Charlotte at the time, was a male. And my first response was, "Oh, that's a bummer." And I said, "So I'm only going to have him for a few years then, I guess." And she looked at me and she said, "No, maybe a few months or maybe a year if you're lucky." Um, and I didn't realize how attached I had grown to them. But I actually was fighting back tears. Um, and as mentioned, I do have multiple personality disorder. There was a certain little girl in my head who was crying. Um, because we actually are very attached to him. He is a very sweet boy. So, for those who don't understand what it means to have a male tarantula versus a female tarantula, females can live, certain species of females can live 30, 40 years. So they have a very long lifespan. For males, they reach sexual maturity and then they have what's called the ultimate molt. Usually this is the last molt in their life. During that molt, their two front legs get hooks. Those hooks are to basically restrain a female to mate with her so she doesn't eat them. Um, Once they get those tubular hooks, that means that's the last molt that they're going to have in their life, and they're probably going to die shortly thereafter. So I've had Charlie now for a few months, um, and kind of every day I come to my room and I'm kind of like, "Charlie, are you still okay? All right, good, we're still good." But I mean, I did read online there was a girl who had, I believe it was um, it was a pink tail, I think, and it was a male who survived like 5 years past his ultimate molt. Never molted again, but he survived for 5 years. So, there was that hope. It's not a very strong hope that I have. I mean, I'm being realistic, but it was a hope. So I ended up getting 3 babies. So I'll go ahead and show you my collection here real quick so you can see what we've got or what I have here. And I'm not sure that you're going to be able to see these guys very well, but hopefully you can a little bit here if I shine the light on her. Let's No, I can't get the lid off. So let me try. This is a G. rosea, or Aracnophobia rosea. She is about 1/2 inch. She's very, very tiny. Her name is Anansi. She is not confirmed for female or male. The babies are way too small for that yet. This little guy here, which you're not going to be able to see him very well either. Let me actually try to turn around this way. This is a Arachnophobia pearl stripes, also known as a choco golden knee. He is about 3/4 of an inch right now. Past few days he's been a little bit lethargic and not really responding very much to stimuli, which probably means he's getting ready to molt. They eat like little horses. And then this one has very quickly kind of been coming into wiggling his little way into my heart. This is the Mexican red rump, or the Brachyphoma vagans. His name is Arachne. As you can see, he probably is almost pre-molt as well. You can see there's like a darkish patch on his rump. So yeah, he is actually one of the more animated tarantulas that I have. When he hunts for food, it's literally a bloodbath. So he's a pretty sweet guy. Now the next one that I'm going to show you is Kali. She is my avicularia or the pink toe. So, let me see here. If you can see her, she's in the back there in her web. I'm not going to move her or disturb her because she is pre-molt. And then this is Charlie. And Charlie is kind of the tarantula that started it all. Granted, I did get Kali and Charlie both at the same time, but I feel like I've bonded more to Charlie than any of the others. So that was kind of my idea that I had, is that, I would share my story with other people who have arachnophobia, let you know that you're not alone, and it's not a silly phobia or anything. My thinking is that there is no mental illness that should be pushed aside or poo-pooed away. So with that said, input on ideas for this project would be really helpful. If you want to share your stories about how you've taken care of tarantulas and that has helped you overcome that fear, then by all means. So with that said, thanks for watching, and feel free to check out my other videos. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.